What if the most powerful weapon you have is not your words, but your silence? Most people spend their entire lives defending themselves. They explain, they justify, they beg others to understand. But what if the need to explain is actually a prison? What if true power comes when you stop explaining yourself? This is the story of a man who discovered that truth, and it changed everything. In a busy town called Millbrook, there lived a young teacher named David who worked at a school. He had passion, creativity, and a genuine love for teaching. But there was one problem. David cared too much about what others thought. Every decision he made, he explained. Every teaching method he tried, he justified. Every step he took, he defended. His life had become an endless cycle of seeking approval from people who never asked for explanations. David had been teaching at Millbrook High for 5 years. He taught history to 10th graders and worked 12-hour days preparing lessons, grading papers, and helping struggling students. But no matter what he accomplished, there was always someone with criticism. The principal would say, "Stick to the textbook, David. Your creative methods confuse students." His fellow teachers would whisper, "He thinks he's better than us with his modern techniques." His relatives would ask, "Why are you still teaching? Get a better job with more money." Even some parents complained, "Why doesn't he teach the traditional way?" And every single time, David would explain himself. He would show them research papers about active learning and spend hours in meetings defending his methods. Deep inside, David was exhausted, but he couldn't stop. He believed that if he could just explain well enough, everyone would finally support him. Slowly, David's passion faded. He stopped experimenting with new teaching methods. He started teaching boring textbook lessons that were safe and acceptable. His classroom, which once buzzed with energy and curiosity, became just another silent, lifeless room. One afternoon, David sat alone in the staff room staring at another email he'd spent an hour writing, explaining to a parent why he used group discussions instead of traditional lectures. Then an old janitor named Mr. Peterson walked in to clean. Peterson had worked at the school for 35 years and seen hundreds of teachers come and go. "Still here, son?" Mr. Peterson asked, noticing David's exhausted face. "Just finishing some emails," David replied without looking up. Peterson glanced at the screen and chuckled. "Another explanation letter?" David looked surprised. "How did you know?" Peterson sat across from David. "Because I've watched you do this for 5 years. You're the best teacher in this school, but you're also the most tired. You know why?" David shook his head. "Because you're trying to convince everyone that you're doing the right thing. But here's what I learned in 35 years. The right people don't need convincing. You could talk until you're blue in the face, and they still won't get it." David felt something crack inside. "But if I don't explain, they'll make my life harder." Peterson leaned forward. "Let me ask you something. When did their understanding become more valuable than your peace of mind?" David had no answer. Peterson continued, "I've seen the greatest teachers this school ever had. You know what they had in common? They didn't waste time on explanations. They just did exceptional work. The students loved them. The results proved everything. The doubters? They came around eventually, without a single word." He stood up. "Your students' success is your proof. Everything else is just noise."
The door closed. David sat there in silence. Peterson's question kept echoing. When did their understanding become more valuable than your peace? That night, David kept thinking about all the energy he'd wasted. How many brilliant ideas had he killed just to avoid criticism? For the first time, something clicked. Maybe I don't owe anyone an explanation. Maybe silence isn't weakness, it's self-respect. That night, David made a decision. He said to himself, "I will no longer explain myself to people who aren't genuinely trying to understand." David started behaving differently. When the principal criticized his teaching style, David simply said, "I appreciate your input." No lengthy defense. When fellow teachers mocked his approach, he smiled and said, "Let's see the results at year-end." No arguments. When parents questioned his methods, he calmly replied, "Your child's progress will speak for itself." No desperate explanations. At first, people were shocked. They pushed harder, expecting the old David. Some became angry, others complained more loudly. But David held firm. He poured all his energy into teaching instead of defending. Something powerful started happening. First, David found peace. His passion returned. His creativity exploded. He designed lessons that made history come alive, debates, role plays, projects that made students think. Second, his results became undeniable. By year end, his students scored the highest marks in the district. Students who hated history started loving it. Parents who complained started thanking him. Third, respect came naturally. The principal now used his methods as examples. Colleagues asked for his advice. Doubting parents now defended him to others. He didn't change minds by arguing. He changed them by making his work impossible to ignore. 1 year later, David was preparing for class when Mr. Peterson walked in with a newspaper. There was an article about Millbrook High winning the Best Teaching Innovation Award, and David's name was prominently featured. "Congratulations, son. You finally learned the secret." David's eyes filled with gratitude. "Mr. Peterson, that question you asked changed everything." Peterson smiled. "You were never weak, David. You just gave your power away every time you tried to justify yourself. The moment you stopped, you became unstoppable." David nodded. Yes, people don't respect endless explanations. They respect quiet confidence backed by results. Peterson patted his shoulder. "Now you understand. Lions don't explain why they're kings. They just are." David's life transformed when he stopped explaining himself. He wasn't stuck because of difficult people. He was stuck because he gave them power over his peace. Not everyone will understand your path, and that's okay. Some will question you, some will criticize you, some will doubt you. Your job isn't making them understand. Your job is staying true to yourself and letting your results do the talking. Strong mountains don't justify their height, they just stand. Powerful oceans don't defend their depth, they just flow. You are defined by who you become when you stop seeking approval. One decision to choose silence over explanation can transform your entire life. If this story changed the way you think, share it with someone who needs this message. Subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one.